Who's wrong and who's wronger? In this corner, followed by millions, James the Exploding Unicorn Breakwell. And in that corner, ignored by millions, Steve Dash Rinko Levers.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Wrong and Wronger. And you know it's time to record when Breakwell has had enough of whatever you've been saying and just interrupts the flow to say, count us down so we can record. So here we are, man. It's me, Dr. Steve, who will listen with an empathetic ear, and he is James, the cut-off Breakwell. I was trying to work the word unicorn into that, and it didn't work, James. But we're here every week to entertain you and do nothing for our own status. But James, how are you doing this week, man?
I am doing wonderful, and I did not cut you off at all. I am positive you got out a full thought. It just wasn't a particularly interesting thought, and that's the difference.
Well, speaking of uninteresting thoughts, we talk about stuff that don't matter to anybody every week. And wow, the returns that we're getting are stark evidence that we couldn't be more correct. But James, what are we going to talk about this week?
We are going to talk about Halloween costumes. The worst ones, the best ones.
Halloween is just around the corner. Sorry, go ahead. Now I cut you off.
You did, and you know what? I am a
this.
gentleman, and it does not even bother me. So please continue with your thought, which I'm sure will continue to be uninteresting.
I am not a gentleman. I'm easily offended and butthurt by the whole thing, so I'm going to sit here smug while you just take the floor.
Well, before we get to Halloween costumes, I'd like to address an issue from last week, because I made a grievous error. It's not something I often do, but I will admit when I'm wrong, because I'm the bigger man, and I was wrong to trust you. Because you grew up in the northern states where it's too cold to support live.
Oh, God dang it. I had that printed out, too. Crap. Okay, finish. Sorry.
That's right. I got to it first. We're doing this on my terms. So, we were arguing about time zones, and I said the Mississippi River should be the border, and Minnesota would have to decide which side it goes on. And you insisted that the Mississippi River was the border between the two states, but it actually jogs over. It goes up through the middle of Minnesota. But you said it didn't, and I believed you, and you were wrong. What do you mean it does not?
Nope.
I'm going to pull up the map right now.
I'm pulling the map right now. I left my printout downstairs, and so I will have it up on my computer momentarily.
I'm looking at it.
I don't know who the listener is, somebody who drags his knuckles on the ground when he walks. I don't know who you've got following you on Twitter, Breakwell, but they obviously are geographically challenged because, as you can... wait a minute, I have to put the phone down while I do this.
Did you draw your own map? It makes up part of the border of Wisconsin and Minnesota, but it keeps going and it curls around. I think it like hits the Twin Cities almost.
Yeah.
But it's in the middle. It's in the middle of Minnesota. It gets to the middle of the state. It is not the border the whole way. Therefore, Minneapolis...
I didn't say it was the border the whole way!
You clearly implied it. Because my whole thing was it would have to pick a side because it goes up into the middle of the state, and you insisted no, it would never do that except for a tiny little bit. That tiny little bit cuts the state in half. Yeah. I went there. Are you still looking for a map to support you? No. There isn't going to be one.
I'm only in the middle of the Serenity Prayer. Hang on. I've got to get this back under control so I don't turn into the Hulk while we're doing our show. I didn't say it was the whole border. I said it comes up and then it curls in a little bit. It goes through the Twin Cities, but it makes up about half the border of Minnesota and Wisconsin.
Those were not your words.
Oh, my God. Why does nobody pay attention to me when I'm a genius?
You do realize that last week's podcast was recorded, and while neither you nor I will ever go back to listen to it again, I'm confident at least one or two listeners will, and they will clearly see that you were wrong about your geography. And that makes me happy, but it also makes me wary, because I don't know what I was thinking to defer to you. What kind of lapse in judgment would I have to just take something you tell me on faith? Like, this new, nicer, wrong and wronger format is making me soft, and that's kind of upsetting.
Well, hold on. Let me just immediately kill off what I was about to say so you don't get kicked off of YouTube. But I would love for someone to go back and pull the clip because I'm not one to say I told you so, but I'm going to spike the phone like a football when I realize that I am correct. Do you remember when the barge hit the bridge between Minneapolis and St. Paul last year and it took out? That was a barge on the Mississippi. Of course it curls in. I didn't say it was the entire border.
You said it only went into Minneapolis for a teeny, or into Minnesota for a teeny tiny bit. That was the clear implication.
I said the words teeny tiny.
Whatever you use in your weird vocabulary to express a similar thought.
I see.
And anyway.
I speak English. I realize I'm speaking over the head. This is exactly the point that I was making when you cut me off and said, count us in.
So anyway, to the dear listener who's a hero and does go back and listen to this, please send me a transcribed screen cap of that section, and I will text it to Steve and gloat so much.
Swear to God, happy Groundhog's Day to you, everybody.
Oh, aren't you glad to be back on this podcast with me, Steve?
I'd like to congratulate everyone who celebrated a mental breakdown during that soliloquy by Breakwell.
All right, so you want to talk about Halloween costumes. So clearly you have something set up. And I'm assuming you're not going dressed up as somebody who's wrong this year, because that's what you are every day of your life. So what are you dressing up as this year, Steve?
I would have read your article this week, but you have been blocked on all my social media and my email. So I'm unaware of what goes on in your life now, Breakwell. But I wanted to, when I brought this up like 2 weeks ago, talk about what we would dress up as when we were children. And you obviously didn't need a costume like I did, because my striking good looks made everyone confuse me for Tony Orlando back in the day. But what did you tend to go as, James?
Well, early on, I went as whatever my mom dressed me up as. She would make the theme costumes. Like one year, we were the Three Little Pigs, and she was the Mama Pig, and my dad was the Big Bad Wolf, because she had sewing skills, and we were also super poor. So she would just make the costumes. And then the most traumatic costume I have, and this is actually an entire chapter in a book I have coming up, but let's go ahead and dump it here, because nobody listens to this podcast anyway. But one year we went...
Mostly because of you, but all right.
Because of our poor geographic knowledge coming from your end. If we knew where rivers went, our listenership would be through the roof. I mean, people were probably so offended by that river course miscue last week that they just turned off in droves.
Sure.
Anyway.
I'm Old Man River and you're a lazy river. But all right, what do we got?
I cannot wait for somebody to send me that screen cap. One person's going to be a hero. I know it. Because
I can't either. I would bet you $1 on this one, but I know I'd never get it.
You know what? You bet me $1 once, and I sent you that $1. I believe I did send you $1.
True.
Yes, I do not. I do not back out of bets. I stick to it. Anyway, I'm gonna get to the story now.
So Little Pigs and we
were with Wizard of Oz, and I was the Tin Man, and my siblings were the Lion and the Scarecrow and all of that. And we went to the center of the universe to show off our costumes, which back in whatever year this was, early 1990s, was the shopping mall. And there was a costume contest at the shopping mall where you had to go up on stage and show off your costumes in front of a big crowd. In my mind, it's a big crowd. Who knows how many people there were? But, back then, malls were not the vacant wastelands they are today. And so we get there with our theme costume, and we can't go up together. We have to go up one at a time. And as the oldest child, they send me up first. Now, something you have to understand about this costume, again, it's homemade. It is made entirely out of cardboard. My arms and legs are cardboard tubes, but not like just the regular kind, but like the kind that is in the middle of carpet rolls. So they are basically as thick as like the wood you build your house out of. My dad had to cut them with a saw. And so those are the links. And then I've got like a dismantled refrigerator box around my chest. And this is all held together with silver duct tape, just completely covered in silver duct tape. So my mobility is super limited. I can just barely make it up the stairs. And for a hat, I have a funnel painted silver and duct taped to my head. And then I've got a cardboard axe that's also covered in duct tape. And so I somehow waddle up the stairs. I'm going first because I'm the oldest kid, and I also have the best costume, and I'm just amazing and belong in front of people. So they send me up there at the ripe old age of 6 or 8 or however old I was. And I get up there, and I accidentally drop my axe. My axe falls on the ground. Now, I have super limited mobility, but hey, You're not a tin man without an axe. So I bend over for the axe, and my hat falls off. Even though it was duct taped to my head, the funnel falls off. So now I've got two things on the ground. The situation is spiraling out of control. And so I bend over just a little bit further to get it, and I fall. And I am stuck like a turtle. I kick my arms and legs, and I can't move.
Flailing toward the ceiling. Yes.
And nobody came up to get me. And somebody in the crowd yelled, "Help, he's fallen and he can't get up." And everybody laughed. And that was long enough ago that was a topical reference. That was like a up-to-date zinger. And finally, my mom was like, 95 months pregnant at the time. My dad had a bad back and could barely bend over himself. And they debated who was going to go up and save me. And finally, my dad came up and drugged me off the stage. And that was...
He grabbed your foot and just...
So that was my most traumatic costume. But what about you, Steve?
Wow, you're reminding me of a moment in first grade where we did a school play and I had to dress up as an old man. So I had one of my grandfather's old outfits on, and I had a white beard made out of cotton balls. And I don't remember, I think I just had a hat. I don't think they put a wig on me, but I had a cane. If you remember the story, The Giving Tree, I think every kid has read that story where the tree gives apples, then it gives wood, and then both the tree and the old man are old, and the old man just sits on the stump and kind of muses about days gone by. But I was the old man in the story, and I had a cane. And through all of our rehearsals, I would just sort of stroll out on stage like a 6-year-old kid, and I was carrying the cane like a loaf of bread, sort of in the middle. And the teachers on the night told me that I had to actually put the cane in front of me and lean on it. And what happened was I fell off the stage. And I don't have a clear memory of this. I probably hit my head, which is why I'm here talking to you today. My lapse in judgments continue on into my 50s. But it's become a family story for the rest of my life, how I fell off the stage during the Christmas pageant in first grade. So both you and I had a semi-traumatic experience, yours far more traumatic than mine, and that kind of shows in our personalities here. But almost every year for Halloween, I think I went as a hobo, just because my parents didn't care. We always trick-or-treated at 3 in the afternoon on Sunday, or maybe it was noon. We never went on Halloween night. It was always the Sunday closest to Halloween, and it was either at noon or at 3. And my dad wanted to watch the Green Bay Packers football game, so he wouldn't go with us. And my mom didn't care one way or the other, so I would go with my brothers or I would go with my friends, and basically just wore crappy old clothes from my dad. It's kind of a theme in my life, James. And I would use a burnt cork and then put schmutz on my face. And that was basically, we would wear 2 ties and a shirt half untucked and our dad's shoes that were too big. And that was it. That was about as creative as the Olivas clan got during Halloween. And we would always make it back for the 3 o'clock football game, which I never cared about.
Well, there's a lot to unpack with what you just said. But first of all, you playing an old man on stage, clearly you were typecast from an early age. It's probably the only believable role you could play.
Old man river.
But how symbolic is it that you fell off the stage? At least when I was stuck in front of people. You fell off. You clearly did not belong in front of an audience, and your body was trying to tell you that. Was it you just by yourself trick-or-treating at noon, or did all the kids trick-or-treat at noon?
Nope. The whole neighborhood, the whole city, the township would trick-or-treat when the siren went off on top of the fire station. It had to have been noon, because when the noon bell rang every day on the fire station, and when the noon bell rang, that's when the kids would all flood into the streets to trick-or-treat.
That's actually really smart, because here we do it at night, and it gets dark and dangerous, and the police are out, and they're handing out glow sticks and stuff. But if you just did it during the day, that'd make more sense. I've always thought that Halloween shouldn't be October 31st. It should just be this last Saturday in October, because Saturday for Halloween is the best. Because if you ever have to go out trick-or-treating at night, like a Thursday night with kids after school and work, it is the worst thing.
Yeah.
And you fill them up with candy, and they got to wake up for school again the next day. It's a nightmare. So yeah, they just...
I don't know. My wife grew up with it on Halloween night all the time, and there's something kind of charming about it if you don't have to get up the next day. But I do completely understand what you're saying. It's a night for adults to stroll around and drink beer while their kids run to different strangers' houses in a neighborhood that they don't live in because they give out full-size candy bars.
It is actually, it's my favorite holiday. I love running around in the dark with my kids. That's the only reason I had kids, was so I could go out and trick or treat again. And every year, we get 20 to 25 pounds of candy. Like, we take it pretty seriously. Gradually, the smaller ones drop off, and I'm just out there with the older ones. But here's why the noontime trick or treating was really genius. Because Halloween is, quite frankly, just a terrible time of year, especially if you're in the Midwest, but especially if you're up in Wisconsin where you were, even if you don't know where the Mississippi River is or goes.
Oh my
because
God.
it is so cold that time of year that no matter what your costume is, half the time it ends up hidden underneath a winter coat anyway. I think 2 of the past 4 Halloweens here, it's actually snowed, which it hardly ever snows around here, but God just really hates Halloween. So you end up just layering up so much. And I've got to think, if you do it at noon when the sun is out, there's a little bit less of that. So maybe people can actually see your costume, even if your costume is both, lazy and offensive. So, by the way, hobo is one of the things you can't dress up in as anymore, because you're basically making fun of like the mentally ill alcoholics out on the road. Like, this is, they are unfortunate, Steve, and now we are nice to the less fortunate. We don't dress up and mock them to get candy. Yeah. So
They ride the rails with the fingers cut off their gloves. What are you talking about?
I love that was your costume. But I also love...
Well, the other nice thing wearing our dad's clothes was you could wear a winter coat underneath
Oh.
it, because I remember freezing on some of those Halloweens. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and you only know that if you're serious about Halloween. Like, otherwise, you go to a couple of people's houses, and then you go in, you stay warm. It's like, no, you stay out the whole time. You get all of the candy. It is a mission. You got to go out and earn that. You earn it from free handouts.
You know what? I'll bet you are being literal when you say we get 25 pounds of candy. You arm 4 kids with shopping bags. I'll bet you're pretty close to the truth with that weight.
Oh, I weigh it every year. I literally weigh it every year.
Oh, you do?
Yes. We always get at least 20 pounds. Now, granted, there were a couple of years there was one year in particular we didn't go out at all. I was one kid ended up having to go to immediate care for some sort of sudden illness, and the other kid, it was snowing outside. I was going to take the other kid out, but it was like freezing sleet. And I was like, you have to put on a coat. And they refused. They just sat there and screamed at the top of the stairs instead of going. And so we didn't go out at all. So that year we got 0. But then the next day we went out and just bought 20 pounds of candy or whatever it was. The day after Halloween sales are incredible. But yeah, usually, 20, 25 pounds we go through. I dump it all into a couple bags and weigh it out on the digital scale upstairs. And it's a point of pride. And it's gotten so heavy in recent years that we've had to start, partway through the night making drops at our house, because, we probably walk 4 or 5 miles over the course of those few hours, and it starts to weigh you down, especially since the kids are small and weak, so they hand their bags to me in between houses, and it's just me lugging 25 pounds around. So yeah, you got to be efficient.
God, my son one year, he punctured his eardrum and got a bad infection in it. And we were up in Wisconsin. One of my brother's daughters is a couple years older than him, but they went trick-or-treating. He must have been 9 and she was like 12, maybe a little younger. But he, with like 103 fever, ran with her from house to house because he would not be dissuaded from trick-or-treating and getting candy. Like, it's a thing with kids. I admire their resolve.
My favorite. So when my oldest daughter was she was born in May, and so she'd been 5 months old, I went trick-or-treating for the first time. I went and we went back to my hometown and went trick-or-treating with my parents because, they've got that big Catholic family, and there were a few straggler children at home who were still trick-or-treating. We went around the neighborhood and we dressed up my oldest as a ladybug, and she's just a super cute infant, has no idea what's going on, sleeps through the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so
all about mom and dad.
an adult man or allegedly adult man, walk up to the door carrying her, and people would answer the door like, do you want me to get her like a banana or something? It's like, no. She wants chocolate for me. Okay, yeah, please, right now. That's clearly why I went through all the trouble to be here for this. And actually, after that, we all ended up getting the flu just horrendously. Yeah, it was. It's also flu season around that time of year, and so that was karma smiting us for trying to sneak out some extra candy gains.
My favorite thing to do now is give out candy because I'll mess with the kids. I'll mess with the adults after all the kids go and the teenagers are out in the neighborhood. I'll mess with them. Like, I love doing just little improv things with the kids. And to me, that's fun. And I sort of withhold candy until they've listened to everything I have to say.
That does not surprise me at all. You probably get very upset if they allegedly cut you off.
There ain't nothing alleged about it. A jury of their peers would send them to the clink for their egregious crimes against Steve-manity.
Do you ply them with questionable geographic facts as they stand in front of you?
Yeah, I ask them things like, which is further north, Maine or Florida? And they always get it wrong.
So, I guess it depends on where you live, too, because I think we're in kind of an awkward spot, and if I were to stay home handing out candy, like, it's a toss-up if anybody would even come here. But, every town kind of develops its own routes, and there's like a route where all the good candy is, and it's like Times Square in the dark there at that night, and that's where all the police officers go with their flashing lights to kind of watch everybody. But that's not where you want to trick-or-treat. You want to trick-or-treat to the houses nobody wants to go to, and you want to be there at the end of the night. Like, you're probably the last person. I'm just going to dump out this bucket in your bag so that I don't eat it all myself. But if you go to the high population areas, like even if every house on the block is giving out candy, they only give you like one little piece because they want to save it for the other couple hundred kids. Like my parents, where they are, I think they get like 300 kids a night sometimes. Those are not the houses to go to. Don't go to the 300 kid houses. Go to the ones way out of the way, and you might just get lucky with a whole bag.
You're like an engineer trying to resolve an issue with the Hubble Space Telescope as you map this out with like a blueprint on your kitchen table of the entire township. And it might even be topographically correct because you don't want to go uphill too much. That takes away your thighs.
I have 35 years of experience, yes, and I do. And you gotta be efficient. You gotta figure out which roads you're gonna go down. You gotta judge where the lights are. You don't want to go any further than you have to carrying it all. You gotta accurately judge the rivers. You don't want to end up in the wrong state. I mean, it's a whole thing, and I take it very seriously.
I'll bet. Yeah, you're like planning war. You've got a pointer with a rubber end that you slap down on the map once in a while and yell at your kids if they're not paying attention.
You know what the most fascinating thing is, though? When people open their doors, you get a glimpse inside their houses. And so
yes.
And these are people like, again, I don't know any of these people. Like, we walk around this neighborhood sometimes, and we just don't see anybody ever. And you have no idea who they are or what's going on inside their house. And every time they open the door, it's like a whole little world. And you get like a 10-second glimpse, and in that 10 seconds you can assume so much about people. You can just get their whole life. Who's inside with them? Are they having a Halloween party? Does everybody have their shirt on? Are they smoking? Is there a weird animal running around? Like, you just get this whole story right then. Then you go to the next house and you do it again and again and again, and then you don't see these people again to the following Halloween. You remember, this is the house that smelled funny. This is the house where nobody was properly clothed. And then you find out, how are they doing 12 months later? Where have their lives led? It's fascinating.
That was my favorite part about collecting with the paper route, that I had about 100 houses on my route, and I had to go door to door to collect a couple bucks every week for them to pay for it. And I would have the same thing, but on a weekly basis. And I judged, I'm not gonna lie, 12-year-old me, I judged everybody on the route, and I knew all of their secrets, James.
Did you judge them by whether or not they paid, or just by what their houses look like?
Ooh, that's a good question, because there was another variable in that equation, which is if they tipped me at Christmas.
Ooh.
Like, that was a big deal too. So I knew who the tippers and who the non-tippers were. So all of that went into my judgment, other than the ones who had dogs that bit me, which we talked about a few weeks ago.
I also would remember the tippers, but it didn't affect service at all. You had to give them a paper whether they tipped or not. So really, tipping your paper boy is entirely useless. I mean, let's just be honest. Especially if the paperboy is you. Like, what are you going to give them in terms of extra service? Like, how are you going to make it worth their while to tip you? Why are you getting a tip at all? You're doing the job you're paid to do at a starvation rate. But nonetheless, you are paid to do this job. Why do you need extra for that?
You are one of the customers whose paper would be delivered page by page each day.
So I was briefly a newspaper reporter, very, very briefly, and I did an internship at the newspaper in my hometown. And so they gave the paper to my parents at the employee discount rate. This was 15 years ago. They are still getting it at the employee discount rate. I am probably the reason that newspaper is going under. They need every subscription they can get. But
everything you touch goes out of business. Your college, your high school, your newspaper. You're the Black Widow.
To be fair, that newspaper is still open, but the entire industry went under. So I would like to take credit for that. Really, any industry that would hire me is doomed. I think we can both agree to that.
Oh, thank God this podcast continues to chug along at the staggering pace that it has. But we got to get out of here, Breakwell. Do you have any closing thoughts on this topic, Halloween and falling off stages or onto stages?
Traumatize your child now so they have something to talk about in a podcast many years down the road. It's the right thing to do.
That's not bad. Well, this has been another scintillating episode of Wrong and Wronger. I know I'm going to get up and run around the house a few times just to burn off all this excess energy that I wasted listening to Breakwell. But until next week, when we come back to you, this is Steve, Dr. Steve Olivas for James the Exploding Unicorn Breakwell, saying thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and always remember, live life by the simple adage, two wrongs can make a right.